Hey YouTube, Ryu here. Alright, so part 2 of what makes a game good or bad. Now, I'm primarily on this video going to be focusing on game mechanics, and that I've saved it for a separate video because it's the most affected by genre, and there's so many aspects to it that there's no way that it was going to fit into the video with all the other stuff. So, let's get into it. Alright. Now, when you think game mechanics, you think combat systems, gear systems, leveling systems, all of that. And yes, that is the primary mechanics of a game. I mean, that's what really makes up the skeletal structure of it. The music is kind of the heart and lungs of it, and then the story tends to be the muscle and tendons. That's how I look at it. Now, if the body doesn't have a strong skeleton, it can't really do a whole hell of a lot, no matter how strong the muscles and tendons are, no matter how strong the heart and lungs are. It's exceedingly limited. You have to have that good skeletal structure, just like a game has to have good mechanics. Now, just having good mechanics in and of itself does not a great game make, but it definitely sets it well on that path. So an example of bad mechanics. Bad mechanics is if you're sitting there and everything else in a game is skill-based, and then you throw in a luck mechanic into it. Now, it's okay to go ahead and do that for like 1, maybe 2 characters if there's a bunch of characters. But you have to keep it in check. I made a video before where I was talking about Monster Rancher and what ended up ultimately taking it down, at least in my opinion. It's the only thing that I can really observe. And that's a big thing. Because Monster Rancher, it was never as big as Pokemon, but it was a very popular franchise. And the fact that it got taken down by something so simple as that just goes to show you that a single bad mechanic can absolutely wreck a game, especially if the developer decides that they're going to keep hammering that in regardless of what the customer wants. With World of Warcraft, they went through and changed all their core mechanics for a lot of their characters. They completely rebalanced, retooled everything, and look what happened. Final Fantasy XI is getting that slow bleed off that they've been having for quite a while now. But the thing is they introduce new mechanics, but they don't change the old stuff, really. Like, they'll rebalance certain things, but it's very small changes. It's not these huge jarring changes. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up SAO in this, because the thing is with the SAO mobile game, it's a skill-based game, and it does take some skill. It's one of the few mobile games that actually really does. I mean, you really have to know your shit if you're gonna go ahead and try to solo certain things. But they do have a failure for a mechanic, and that is the matchmaking system. The matchmaking system is made for the game being exceedingly popular. Well, like I covered in a video before, their diamond system is based off of the game not being popular. So it's two conflicting mechanics, and the thing is unfortunately the matchmaking system is the mechanic that people are really going to look hard at, because, well, I mean, at that point, if you want to play with friends, here's a problem. If you want to go ahead and you want to grind a certain instance with friends, each and every single time you have to find each other in matchmaking. So whoever's going to be the head of the party goes ahead, starts up the party, and then sets it to friends only. Then the friends have to go in and click join party, and then put down look for friend. And that system, well, that system isn't exactly intuitive. Because the thing is me and my cousin ended up trying to go ahead, and we were just going to go ahead and go in with the two of us. So I set up a thing. He went ahead, went and searched for friends. Of course, we're friended on there. And it said no matches for him. So we ended up having to go through and do this thing where you type in a kind of a passcode type of thing. It's not a little 4-digit passcode that you type in as the person who's in charge. No. It's this big-ass, long number where they basically have to look back and forth between your phone multiple fucking times to go ahead and get it in there and type it in. But the thing is, it's not even a type in, it's a scroll thing. Kind of like on plane luggage. Well, that's problematic in and of itself, because that means you are spending minutes between matches just trying to get into a fucking party. When you spend longer getting into a fucking party than you do in the instance itself, the matchmaking system has failed. So, yeah. I know I'm kind of railing on it, but the thing is that is an example of a failed mechanic right there. Another example of a failed mechanic, hunters in World of Warcraft. At first, you know, they had a certain feel to them, they had a certain way of doing things. Alright, fine, good. You know, you could go ahead and change up a few things, you could actually somewhat personalize it. Awesome. Then all of a sudden, Cataclysm comes out, boom, no, it's a fucking ranged rogue. A lot of people that played with hunters as their main, or if that was basically their only character, like their next highest level character was 30 or 40 levels below, they sat there and said, oh, fuck that noise, and went ahead and fucked off to another game. Now, the problem for Blizzard there was they didn't draw in enough new players to counter out the old players leaving. So, again, bad mechanic. You see a shift like that maybe as a developer you should sit there and think, well, maybe let's not go ahead and solidify that in. Let's go ahead and roll it back and maybe try something else later. An example of a good mechanic. Everyone's heard of Kingdom Hearts, but very few people have heard of Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts was a skill-based action, kind of live action style, but turn-based, a lot like Final Fantasy VII RPG. Of course, a JRPG, so you're going to get some weirdness in there. But it was a lot like Legend of Dragoon. Like, Legend of Dragoon and Shadow Hearts came out in around the same time period. And they both had this mechanic in them where a disc came up with with highlighted areas on it based off of your weapon that you were using or the ability that you were trying to use. And you had to go ahead and time the button presses with a rotating thing around the disc. Now, that, to some people, they're all like, oh, well, that would get annoying really quick. You would think. Not really. Because the thing is, like I said, it was based off of whatever ability you were trying to use or whatever weapon you were attacking with. So when you got a new weapon that was, you know, better, you know, had better stats, whatever, whatnot, you then had to go through and learn the timing for it. And some of these got really, really hard. Like in Shadow Hearts, the most overpowered weapon in there was a fucking slingshot, okay? But the thing is the margin of error on that thing was so slim that it was hard to actually get the full hit anyway. And you could actually time it if you were good enough to give yourself critical hits. That's how it decided criticals. It wasn't a random roll of the dice. It was all skill-based. Awesome mechanic. People absolutely loved it. quite frankly, I'm sad that Shadow Hearts didn't get the exposure that it needed to really make it mainstream. We probably would have a very different gaming market today. Especially if it had gotten a second release. I mean, at least in the US. I don't know if they released another one in Japan. They probably did. But it was an exceedingly fun game. Good story, memorable characters, and an awesome soundtrack. It was an example of a very good game. Hell, I still get on and play it on an emulator. I still have my old version, so before you guys go, oh, he's a fucking pirate, I'm not. I just don't have a functional old PlayStation. If I did, then I'd be playing it on there. You think I'd be playing it on a fucking emulator? Oh, hell no. But yeah, now, like I said, it depends on the genre as far as mechanics, like what is good and what isn't. Now, if you've got like a roulette game, obviously it's going to be luck-based, so, you know, can't bitch about it being a luck-based mechanic. However, I've noticed a lot of things with MMOs and so on and so forth. They rely a lot on luck, you know, like as far as getting criticals. There's actually very few true skill-based games. I mean, you've got your first-person shooters, which of course those are going to naturally be skill-based. Well, unless someone's using hacks, at which point there's no skill involved and go fuck yourself. But when you get RPGs, a lot of them are very much luck-based. So that can be a real issue. And, you know, everyone sits there and says, oh, well, you're a Final Fantasy XI fanboy. Well, the thing is I will bitch about Final Fantasy XI. There is a luck-based system in there. But you're not going to be able to remove luck from any game. I mean, hell, even in first-person shooters, you sit there, you throw that Hail Mary grenade, and all of a sudden get a quad kill. Because all the enemies were running in that direction, you happen to land it right in the middle of the group, and it killed all of them. You know, there's going to be luck in these games. However, having it where the luck supersedes skill is where a lot of games have a misstep. You should never have it where a mechanic can completely override every other mechanic in the game. There needs to be a check and balance system. There always needs to be a mechanic that can beat out another. Now, the more complex that little rock, paper, scissors game gets, the less apparent any glaring issues are going to be. But if you make a game overly complex, where you need spreadsheets just to figure out how to predict even a basic attack, well, you're going to drive people away again. So you have to find that balance. But as far as mechanics are concerned, you've got several different subcategories. You've got combat mechanics, which are pretty self-explanatory. It's the mechanics that dictate combat and the flow of combat. You've got gear mechanics, which can go in there. A lot of games have gear mechanics, you know, which is basically an upgrade mechanic. Leveling mechanics, again, games are starting to get more complex with that. Final Fantasy VII actually kind of paved the way for that, where you actually have multiple levelings going on a single character. But that only makes sense if you're going to actually have a level of customization there. These games where you have to play a cookie-cutter character, there's no excuse for having multiple levels of something unless you're just trying to pad out gameplay. Then you also have a potential for summoning mechanics. That's a completely different beast. I'm not really going to touch on that because that's more of a niche thing. You have utility mechanics. So basically, healing, usable items, so on and so forth. Hell, technically, movement mechanics would be considered a utility mechanic, just very specialized. Speaking of movement mechanics, kind of an important thing. How are you getting around the world? How are you getting around that level? How are you moving around your enemies? How is it flowing into the combat mechanic? So on and so forth. You have to take all of these things into account. Now remember, this is just to build up the skeleton of your system. You still have the main meat of it that you still have to do with the other things. This is your foundation. So if a game doesn't have good mechanics, there is no way it's going to be a good game. Well, it might be an okay game, but it will hold itself back from being great. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rail on No Man's Sky, because it is an example of a lot of things done wrong. A lot of things poorly implemented. A lot of good ideas there, but everything being implemented in the worst conceivable way. The harvesting mechanic. Extremely unintuitive. Not good. Not varied. The crafting mechanic was absolutely pathetic. Saying it was bare bones is an insult to skeletons, alright? Honestly, just no. The crafting mechanic would have been better off not even being there. And this is coming from someone who loves crafting mechanics. You've also got other aspects of games that you have to take a look at when you're designing these mechanics. Does it fit the story? Because you can't sit there and write a medieval style story yet having super advanced technology mechanics behind it. That's exceedingly hard, and it's very jarring. A lot of people it'll suck them right out of that immersion. Do some games do that and do it well? Yes, but those are the exception more than the rule. Oh, another thing, NPC mechanics. If you're going to have NPCs, you better damn well have them serve a purpose. Either they're going to be there for fucking set dressing, they're going to sit there and be adventuring buddies with you and actually be helpful, or they're going to be the most hated motherfucker on the planet and try to be a hybrid of both. And guess what? That hatred bounces off of them and right onto the developer. Well, shit. Oh, wait. Yeah, we kind of had that with No Man's Sky, didn't we? The NPCs, which were supposed to be split up into these factions, it was supposed to make a big difference which factions you befriended, and so on and so forth. Nope. They were just basically there as checkpoints. Just basically, oh, you want some random quest? Here you go. Awesome. Combat mechanic in it. Again, it was a fucking joke. It so badly wanted to be a first-person shooter, but it didn't even get that right. And that's about as simple as you get. When they sit there and try to have you use different weaponry, no. For one, the poor optimization of the game made it to where if you used anything other than a fucking laser, because it's a hit scan weapon, and anyone who doesn't know what hit scan is, it means as soon as you pull that trigger, it instantly makes contact with the enemy no matter how far away they are, as long as they're within that effective range. So if you got a laser that can sit there and fire infinitely infinitely far away, then you could easily snipe someone as long as they're not over the curve of the horizon. All you have to do is just point it at them and have that reticule on them when you pull the trigger. That's all you have to do. You're guaranteed the hit. Because it's instantaneous. As soon as you pull that trigger, they go down. Or at least take the damage. If it's not going to outright kill them. Then you have non-hit scan weapons. Those are the ones where, you fire a burst of ammunition or you fire a single shot, and it actually takes time for the projectile to travel from point A to point B. So if an enemy looks and sees it for a really far away shot, they can just, sit there and just step to the side, done and over with. They're out of range of it, and they can fire off their counterattack before your projectile even makes it to them. And you're fucked if they have a hit scan weapon, because they're going to probably kill you before your round even reaches them. So yeah, that's a problem. That's the reason why a lot of hit scan weapons in a lot of games end up being significantly less powerful than the ones where the bullet takes time. It's kind of got that Dragon Ball Z mentality behind it, where it's all like, the less powerful it is, the faster it moves. But if it's slow-moving energy and you get touched by it, you're instantly done. And it makes sense. I mean, you kind of have that in the real world. I mean, a 9mm bullet, is that enough to drop a person? Yes, it is. But if they have armor, will the armor block it? Yeah, they could easily have that bullet deflect off of it. Will it still hurt? Yeah, but it might not kill them. Tank rounds. That's a completely different story now, isn't it? But that tank round doesn't move as fast as that bullet. Doesn't move anywhere near as fast. But it has a lot more energy behind it because of its extra mass, even though it's moving slower. So it makes sense. But when you combine a mechanic like that, where the hit scan weapon is just about as powerful, if not more powerful, than the slow-moving one, then it makes it so any choice afterward is stupid if you don't go with a hit scan weapon. Then you combine that with bad AI characters. Well, just bad AI, because those animals were... let's just say this. It doesn't surprise me that they only exist on their own separate planets. Because if they were around each other all on one planet, 3/4 of those populations would have died out. Just from sheer stupidity. But then you also have the aliens, which serve no real purpose other than to give you random quests. You have diversity in such small amounts between planets that all the planets that have that basic archetype all basically seem the same. Same thing with animals. It's all like, oh, instead of this one having a horn directly in the middle of its head, it's just, so slightly to the right. Oh, the next one, it's so slightly to the left. The lack of multiplayer made the entire area feel completely empty, completely devoid of life, completely dead. Now, do you see how bad mechanics can kind of snowball? Because the thing is the more bad mechanics you have in a game... remember, a single bad mechanic can ruin a game. A bunch of bad mechanics that all have links to each other can make a game infamously bad. And I'm not talking about cult classic bad, where you play it because it's so fucking bad. Not like the original Duke Nukem. I'm talking about bad as in, dude, anyone who bought this game should be able to sue the developer. Bad. When you come down to mechanics, you have to look at how it's going to interact with the surrounding world and how all the mechanics are going to interact with each other. Do they support one another? Are they a check and balance system to one another? What the fuck is it? If you cannot have a flowchart of that as a developer, and you just have random ideas up there on the board, and you cannot distinguish what the connections between these are, your game's probably going to seem schizophrenic. It's probably not going to be the funnest it could be. And you're going to lose sales. You're going to lose face. And you're going to have a lot of people bitching. So be prepared for that. A lot of people sit there and say Dark Souls is the hardest game out there. Well, they haven't played any Japan-only games. Again, another video. But the game was meant to be difficult. It wasn't difficult because of bad controls like Resident Evil. It wasn't difficult because of an unintuitive combat system. The combat system was very laid out. The instructions that the game gives you let you know just about everything that you need to know. There are some extra special advanced things that it doesn't tell you, but for the most part it tells you everything that you need, and you could figure out those other things on your own given enough time playing the game, perfecting the art, so to speak. But the game's also heralded as an extreme masterpiece because of the unique enemies in it, the oppressive feeling that you get from just being in that game world, the way all of the different mechanics come together, the way that the mechanics reflect the story and the story reflects the mechanics, the music matching the boss fights. That's what happens when someone actually goes through and pays attention to their game and builds their game with the rest of the game in mind. So each mechanic had everything else considered. The story had the mechanics of the game considered. The character creation had the mechanics and the story considered. Do you see the pattern here? Everything was interconnected. But then you have games like No Man's Sky, where nothing's connected, where everything just kind of exists in its own bubble and competes for time. Making the game experience feel shallow, feel hollow. Even though there's a bunch of content there, which I kind of argue against that, but again, I could make an entire video based on that. If you guys want to see that, go ahead and let me know. If even one person wants to see it, I'll go ahead and make a video on that one. But the thing is, the way that games are made has to be with the end user's experience in mind. Because if you make a game that is fun, you're going to make your profit back as long as you're able to market it. Which, guess what? A lot of YouTubers out there are looking at these indie games. So even indie developers don't have an excuse anymore. Because they can go ahead, give a copy of their game to these YouTubers. These YouTubers will sit there and play it. Go ahead and maybe, yeah, point out a few bugs. But go ahead and work on fixing those bugs. But if you have confidence in your game and you actually think your game is fun, which, by the way, play your own game first. If you don't enjoy playing your own game, then no one else is going to enjoy it. Because the thing is that game's your baby. You're going to be a little partial toward it. But that is one thing that a lot of these developers don't do. They don't have the end user's experience in mind. All they have is, how many copies can we sell? When you make a game with that in mind, you end up with shit like No Man's Sky. Pure and simple.